All right, hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special chapter meeting on community solar. I'm Ava Sani. I'm serving as chair of the Climate Reality Project, Philadelphia and Southeastern Pennsylvania chapter. It's wonderful to see you all tonight on this collaborative call with distinguished leaders from our allied organizations. We're honored to have three guest speakers tonight. Liz Robinson, Executive Director at Philadelphia Solar Energy Association, Chris Spar, Executive Director at Centennial Parkside Community, Senior Director for Energy and Climate at Penn Future. We know that each of our to renewable energy in Pennsylvania and across our nation and world, and how our allied organizations are working to make this a reality in Pennsylvania, and how our chapter can engage in this important advocacy work. So our three guest speakers will share their presentations and take about 10 to 20 minutes each, and then we'll host a Q&A panel discussion at the end. So during the presentations, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat. We'll be collating those. Margarita and Claudia will be helping, and we'll take as many questions as possible before adjourning tonight at 8:30 p.m. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker, Liz Robinson. Liz Robinson is the Executive Director of Philadelphia Solar Energy Association, PSEA, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding solar energy across the state. PSEA conducts STEM education projects designed to increase students' understanding and engagement in solar energy and related technologies. Prior to coming to PSEA, Liz founded and directed the Energy Coordinating Agency, ECA, for more than 30 years. ECA provides energy efficiency, education, workforce development, home repair, and bill payment assistance services to thousands of low-income households every year in Pennsylvania and Delaware. Liz co-founded and directed the Keystone Energy Efficiency Alliance, KEEA, the Energy Efficiency Trade Association for Pennsylvania and New Jersey. She also managed the Energy Cooperative Association of Philadelphia, ECAP, expanding it to a regional organization and taking it into the renewable energy market. Tonight, Liz will explain what community solar is. Welcome, Liz, and I'll
Thank you so much, Ava. Really nice to be with all of you tonight. This is a subject that many of us have been working on for quite a long time. So community solar is an ongoing effort. Could I just ask, I don't want to assume that people know a lot about community solar. If you don't, can I ask folks to unmute and quickly just say whether they feel they're beginners or advanced? Do you know, just that, are you a beginner or advanced? Maybe the easier thing to do is, if you are a beginner, could you raise your hand in the, raise your little hand there? Beginners? Okay. And if you feel like you're advanced, could you raise your hand if you're advanced? Okay, so a few advanced. All right, well, you advanced folks, you'll have to forgive me, but I'm going to assume that a simple overview would be helpful. So I'm going to share a few slides here and just give you kind of a very basic overview of community solar. Can you all see this slide now? Mm-hmm. So we're before I start, let me just introduce myself a little bit to tell you who the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association is. We call ourselves PSEA. PSEA is a local nonprofit. We've been around for quite a number of years. And PSEA's principal work is education in schools. We run the Junior Solar Sprint project in partnership with Drexel University. And we are expanding our work in schools by writing curriculum for middle schoolers. So we've written 5th grade science and climate change curriculum, which is now being introduced in Philly schools and in the region, and to some degree outside of Pennsylvania. And now we're working on 6th grade. So our goal is really to develop strong STEM education in public schools and private schools on solar and the role of solar energy in combating climate change. So that work is our programmatic work. And then on the policy side, we're working in Harrisburg, principally in Harrisburg, a little bit in DC, on supporting any and all policies that will, as Abba said, accelerate the growth of solar statewide. So I want to also just take a second to say that two very recent polls in Pennsylvania done by very different organizations find that solar energy is the most popular form of energy in Pennsylvania. And the first study was done by Vote Solar, a poll statewide, with kind of an oversample of rural Pennsylvania and Western Pennsylvania. So solar energy came out on top as the preferred source of energy statewide. And if any of you would like that study, just let me know and I can send it to you. The second study is a little more, it's different. It focuses on the types of solar, and it was done by a group of academics at Princeton. And really germane to our subject tonight, it found that Pennsylvanians are very supportive of community solar, that supported, again, rural, urban, Democrat, Republican, across all types of Pennsylvanians. Solar and shared solar are very, very desirable. So I think that's really an important backdrop to the discussion tonight. So what the heck is community solar anyway? It's a program that allows consumers to lease and the reason for community solar, there are multiple reasons for it, but one of the principal reasons is Pennsylvanians cannot access solar directly. They might rent their property. And the way that it works, and utility in that area will gather together, can be both residential and commercial customers. And those subscribe from the utility. So the law adopted in each state determines all the details, but subscribers all sharing one very large is handled by the electric utility. But again, the details vary state to state. It has a lot of advantages. Community solar has a tremendous advantages. Principal among them, I'll come back to this, but principal among the advantages is that it creates access to solar for everyone. And that's huge. That's, I would say, the principal value of community solar is that it can create access to solar for everyone, both commercial and residential customers. It is also hassle-free. It's a little easier than putting a system on your own building. It can be very flexible, depending again on the law and the regulation. Community solar can allow a customer to move from one address to another and retain their relationship with a community solar project. And this fourth one is really, I think, the key. Because larger solar projects can be built at a lower cost, those savings can be passed on to customers. So it can be provided at a lower cost per watt than a small system on your own home. And these others are really obvious and pertain to almost all solar systems, creates consumer choice, spurs local development, job creation, and certainly is good for the environment. So where do we see community solar? It's getting to be a pattern here that these maps show Pennsylvania in gray, and gray is the color of states that are not doing anything. So Pennsylvania is gray. 19 states, these in orange, have enacted community solar through law, and there are statewide programs either in place or moving into place. And this is slowly increasing. It was a very rapid increase, but now the states, which is the majority of states, have pilot programs underway. And as you see, there are a very small number of gray states, and we are one of them. Community solar is growing in both the number of states and in the total amount of solar that has been New York, which is one of our neighboring states, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado, New Jersey, have very strong community solar programs. So once again, Pennsylvania has kind of strong programs. taking community solar is the first bill that was written in Pennsylvania would have permitted community solar customers to have a bill credit rate of full retail. In other words, essentially that's important so that the true value of solar is passed on to the customer and the customer is able to offset much more of their bill. In Pennsylvania, we do have a very strong net metering tariff. We're still ranked at the top among states. And if you put solar on your own home through net metering, you get full retail rate. We would love to see customers. I'm not going to dwell on this, but we do have something in Pennsylvania called virtual net metering. I'm sorry, virtual meter aggregation, sorry. We don't have virtual net metering. A virtual meter aggregation is a terrific service, which allows, if you have more than one meter in the same area within a 2-mile radius, you can put solar on the sunniest of those meters, of those buildings, and get credit for any excess at any and all. We do have, we need virtual net metering, and that's really what community solar is. I'll just skip through this really quickly. As I'm sure all of you know, the cost of solar has fallen dramatically in the last decade. A little bumpy, having to do with supply chain issues and other issues that I won't go into, but in general, the cost of solar should continue to be very low, and the more solar we have, the lower the cost. This is a really important point, and the last one that I'll make, which is that the cost of solar can be lower than the electric utility's current default rate. In other words, if you are buying your electricity from your utility, from PECO, for example, we've done the modeling to prove that community solar in Pennsylvania can be produced at lower than PECO's normal rate. That's called the default rate. This is absolutely key for participation among low-income customers. Low-income customers, low and low moderate income customers need to save money through community solar, and community solar can deliver these savings. So that's a really important thing to remember. And next steps, I'm going to leave to Rob Altenberg to talk about legislation and where we are. And we need everyone's help, everyone's support. So thank you, and I'll stop sharing now. I think we're going to save questions till all three of us have spoken, because other speakers may clarify. So I just wanted to give an overview of community solar, what it is, and then we're going to now dive into a little bit more nitty gritty. So I'm going to turn it over. I think Chris Spar, are you up next? And can you introduce yourself?
I think I am up next. Is that right, Ava? Ava, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Hear me now? I believe my
Yes. Yes, we can hear you now.
I'd like to introduce Chris a little bit, and if I miss anything, I'm sure there's so much that I don't know, and he can fill in the rest. But thank you, Liz, for your presentation. And our next speaker is Chris Spar. Chris has served as the executive director of the Centennial Parkside CDC since 2017. He's always had a deep love for cities and energy that flows through them. This love inspired him to become an urban planner. In 2019, he completed a PhD in urban planning from the University of Wisconsin and now serves as an urban innovation fellow at Drexel University's Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation, in addition to his work at the Centennial Parkside CDC. His research is focused on how social enterprises within communities can build wealth through shifting resource ownership to communities. These are the same topics that motivate him to serve the East Parkside community. So tonight, Chris will share a short video on Centennial Parkside CDC and talk about their prior efforts to initiate a community solar project in Philadelphia. And he'll also share some insights in solar projects. So welcome, Chris, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Ava, and thank you for the invitation to speak to all of you tonight. It's really, really an honor. And Liz, I just want to compliment you on your awesome presentation about community solar. When you asked who were beginners and who were experts, I was kind of like, well, I guess I'm supposed to be an expert, but I'm kind of in the middle. And I definitely learned from your presentation that aggregate net metering, for example, I didn't know about, and I was really,
Yeah, net metering is important.
yeah. Well, I knew about net metering, but the aggregate net metering part was new to me, and that was exciting to hear. And I also loved your slide with the different panels, and one allotted to the Jackson family, one allotted to the school, and one allotted to, I forget what the other one was, but it's like such a great illustration of community solar. So I may have to borrow that idea from you for any future presentations. But like I said, my name is Chris Spar. I'm the executive director of the Centennial Parkside Community Development Corporation. And from my understanding, I'm talking to people from all over the state. Is that correct? Not everybody here is from Philadelphia, right? So I can't assume that everybody knows the geography of Philadelphia very intimately. So with that in mind, I'll explain a little bit of where we're located. So we are, and actually, I know I wasn't going to do a presentation or anything, but if it's okay for me to share my screen, I thought it might be useful just to share a map that I have up so folks could see that. Is that okay?
Sure.
Great. Just as an illustration, I was thinking. Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see a map on my screen right now? Is that a yes? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So sorry, I just skipped through. This is an old presentation, but and I'm not going to go through the whole presentation, I promise. I just wanted to show the map. So yeah, we are a community development corporation located in the East Parkside neighborhood of West Philadelphia. And for those who are familiar with West Philadelphia, we are located in the neighborhood that's best known for the Philadelphia Zoo. So we're bounded to the east, and I'll kind of move my cursor around here, by the Schuylkill River, to the west by Belmont Avenue or 44th Street, to the north by Fairmount Park, which is considered, the largest urban manicured park in the country, and then to the south by the Amtrak Philadelphia to Harrisburg rail corridor. And this map is relevant because of the space where we're located, the area of the city that we're located in, as we talk about community solar. And we're a traditional community development corporation. We have a mission to preserve, promote, and revitalize East Parkside through partnerships with businesses and institutions and programs that engage residents, increase opportunity, and grow a diverse, thriving community. And we do this through a lot of the traditional ways that community development corporations work. In fact, after I get off this presentation, I'm going to finalize a grant that we're writing to work on to fund the acquisition of land and creation of affordable housing in our neighborhood, because we're in the business of affordable housing development. And we're also in the business of commercial corridor development, so trying to attract new businesses to what is a blighted, abandoned commercial corridor. We're also in the business of cleaning and greening the neighborhoods. We have a whole team of people who are out cleaning every day in the neighborhood. And that's a lot of the traditional things that community development corporations do. And we serve a neighborhood that's very much in need. We were founded by residents in 2015 because the residents of the community saw that there's a lot of investment occurring around us. We're very strategically located, as you can see by this map. We host the Philadelphia Zoo. We host the Please Touch Museum, which is the children's museum for Philadelphia. We're next to Fairmount Park. We have easy access to downtown through I-76. We're a stone's throw away from University of Pennsylvania and Drexel University. And there was just a lot of investment going into those areas, those anchor institutions, those educational institutions. But the residents were struggling. At the time, we were one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. We still are. We have a median household income of just above $14,000. We have an older housing stock. And we have residents who are just struggling to hang on. And in the face of increasing development in West Philadelphia that could create a lot of gentrification and displacement. And so that was why the Community Development Corporation was founded in 2015. And the board itself had an innovative idea around how can we produce, and this is what my research is focused on as well, as I said in the introduction, how can we focus on building wealth in the community through creating resource ownership in the community? And so when we think about resources in the community that could be owned by the community and could be monetized, we thought about energy. So we're surrounded by anchor institutions, need energy. Could we produce energy on a lot of our vacant land, on a lot of our underutilized park space, on a lot of the underutilized parking lots that appear in our neighborhood that belong to the zoo and the Please Touch Museum? And could we sell that energy? Could we sell that energy to those anchor institutions? Could we have residents use that energy? And so these were questions that we were asking, but we ran up against those barriers that were so well presented by Liz, and that we'll hear from later when we talk about policy barriers, that we weren't able to tie multiple meters into one solar array. And so if we were going to create sort of community ownership of solar energy, we needed to create individual arrays for each sort of anchor institution, so they could have their own array, and they could buy it through with what is called a power purchase agreement, where someone would own those arrays. In this case, it was going to be us as the Community Development Corporation, and representing the community, and the off-takers were going to be those larger anchor institutions. And so this is still a model that we're pursuing. And Abba, if you actually, did you have the video queued up? And we can see if that works. Let me just unshare my screen, because I think the video is produced actually by the founder of our organization, and it was produced as a way to go after some grant money, frankly, which we actually ended up getting. But but I think it's a good illustration of what we were trying to do. So Abba, if it works, we can give that a try and maybe try to play the video. And if it doesn't work, I know video is tricky on Zoom, then it's not essential. We can't see. Oh wait, there we go. Okay.
President of the Centennial, what some see as our neighborhood. But before the Centennial World's Fair, 5 megawatts of solar spread across 3 institutions in the neighborhood, and the revenue generated from the sale of energy will be recycled back into the neighborhood. The neighborhood is literally the birthplace of NA.
So we've seen people and we've seen buildings come down. But I think you can see that now in those bad times.
Grew up here, when I was in Jersey for 15 years, and worked for IBM. Like everybody else, job was outsourced, so we had to downsize. So I said to myself, my parents left me some property on Viola Street. And I'm like, stop seeing what you see. Just visualize. You remember when you first started coming around here? Just visualize. So we moved back and we started to work.
Vision. With help from Sunshot, we will have a key piece of the financing and planning support we need to go from concept to implementation. And from there, we will prove that this model can scale to any low-income community. Thank you for meeting a few of our residents and taking a tour of our neighborhood.
All right, thank you for that. It was a little bit choppier than if you watch it on YouTube or whatever, but you can find it on our website if you go to the news section, and you can watch that as well as some other videos that we have posted there. But I still feel like I get welled up when I see that video, because I feel it's a very inspiring sort of idea and a very inspiring model that like I said, we're still trying to pursue. But we're also, thinking back to what Liz was saying in regards to the benefits of community solar. If you think about a neighborhood like ours, you have a lot of older homes. You have, thanks to Timothy for that question. I'll type it in the chat as I talk here. You have a lot of older homes. There we go. A lot of older homes. You have a very low income community. Some of those homes are shaded. Some of those homes don't have roofs that can properly hold solar panels on them. You have people who don't have a lot of access to credit and don't have a lot of cash in the bank. And so it's very hard for them to put solar on their roofs. And so community solar, if it were properly legislated in the state of Pennsylvania, would be a huge benefit to communities like ours, not only for the wealth building opportunities that we explained in terms of like the ownership model that we're trying to work on, but just if we could have these solar arrays, these community solar arrays that people could be a subscriber to, or even be an owner of, that were off-site, that were not on their homes, they could save money on their energy costs. They could lead the charge in terms of climate change, because a lot of the communities that are going to be the least climate resilient are the lower income communities of color. And so wouldn't it be great if one of those communities was leading the charge in terms of pushing back on climate change? And so we still have this vision. We believe that our residents deserve healthy homes, energy efficient homes. And when we talk about affordable housing, we don't believe that it's just the upfront cost of the house purchase. We believe it's the long-term cost of maintaining that house, of paying your utility bills. And so we have a true belief that is the way to go, is to lower energy costs for our residents, as well as just create, healthier places for them to live. So, we are still pursuing this model around creating solar for the local anchor institutions around us. There's a lot of interest in it. We just haven't gotten the first one to really take the step forward and do this with us. We're about this far away from doing it with the Philadelphia Zoo, which what we have been for about 3 years. And the pandemic kind of got in the way of that as well. But we're still exploring that model. But in the meantime, we were able to raise some money through some support from the William Penn Foundation, as well as through a corporate sponsor, the Spark Therapeutics, which is located here in West Philadelphia. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to deploy this money. And we were having conversations with the Solarize Philly program in Philadelphia, which is a program that is trying to make it less expensive for folks to put solar on their homes. And they're doing it through a group buying program where you can get 100 homes together. They put out an RFP for installers that will say, hey, we'll install on these 100 homes for this fixed cost. And they buy all the equipment wholesale, and that just brings down the cost of installing solar on rooftops. But you still need to have access to credit, or you still need to have the upfront cash to make it happen. So we were talking to the Philadelphia Energy Authority and their Solarize Philly program. We said, hey, this is a great program, but it still is it's exasperating an equity gap when it comes to access to solar, or to energy innovations. When it comes to access to solar, because even though you're lowering the cost, you're not lowering it to the level that a low-income family would be able to access it. So we said, so what can we do to work with you to start to build a model that would work for low-income families? And they said, well, we really need a lender. We need a lender who can lend to us at a really low rate of return. And we said, well, we'll be that lender. We have the cash. We talked to our donors. They said that's a great way to use that money. So we lent out $220,000 to get the program started. We did 44 households with the low-income households with the Philadelphia Energy Authority. We get that money back, and we get it at a rate of return of 3%. So that money can be cycled back into the program. But it wasn't enough money to do it at scale. But what happened is then First Trust Bank came in and said, you know what, we'll lend money to it as well. So now First Trust Bank started to lend money. And then Solarize Philly found a solar installer named Passagen Energy that said, you know what, we love this program. We're going to come in and we're going to lease panels to folks for no money down. And we will do energy upgrades to the households to ensure that those households are saving money on their energy bill, saving at least 20% on their energy bill. And that's after they pay their lease. So they pay the lease and they pay their energy bill, and all that together is 20% less than what they're paying their electric utility now. So they made that commitment, and they've been following through on that commitment for about 6 months now. And so a family can lease solar panels for 15 years, and it's no money down, and their lease plus whatever they're paying for whatever their solar doesn't cover is 20% less than what their energy bill was prior to that. And Passagen won't do the installation if they can't meet that standard. And so we are finding ways to bring solar to low-income families, but there's still a lot of barriers. Still a lot of households, they need a new roof, and a lot of times the Energy Authority realized they needed to buy a whole new roof for a family before they could put the panels on, and that required more subsidy. And so I still believe that, as Liz presented, community solar is the way to go. I really appreciate the folks who are out there advocating for it. Because we as a 501c3 nonprofit who are trying to do a million things don't always have time to go and talk to our legislators, don't always have time to go out there and be the front line advocates for it. But we know that there are people that are out there doing it and pushing for it, and we really appreciate that, because we believe that once we get the right sort of legislation in place, we will be at a spot where we can be energy innovators in the low-income community and really reach the principles of climate justice, which we're trying to do. So that's all I really have to present at this point. I hope I didn't go too far over time. And I'm really excited to answer questions and have more discussion later on in this conversation.
Thank you for sharing your experiences and insights. And I look forward to the Q&A as well.
Abba, it sounds like you might be on the wrong microphone. You're very distant. You click the little up arrow next to the mic button, you might see a different mic option.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay, I think I'll try to speak a little loud then.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, all right. Well, now I'd like to introduce our final guest speaker, Rob Altenberg. Rob is the Senior Director for Energy and Climate at Penn Future, a statewide environmental nonprofit. He focuses on legal and policy issues, tools to reduce carbon pollution, improve air quality, and put Pennsylvania on a pathway to a sustainable energy future. Before working for Penn Future, he spent 22 years with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, serving in the Bureau of Air Quality and the Policy Office. So tonight, Rob will take us through the legislative and legal issues around community solar in Pennsylvania and how we can best focus our advocacy efforts to make community solar in Pennsylvania a reality. So welcome, Rob, and I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Abba, and thank everybody for being here. As Liz noted, a lot of these it's always challenging to hit the right note of complexity when you have people that have been doing this for years and people that are brand new to this. So I'll try not to I'll try not to start too basic, but I'm afraid I'm going to. I like to start off with, like, why are we doing what we're doing? And ultimately, the problem that we, at least at Penn Future here, are trying to solve is getting to net zero by 2050, getting our carbon pollution cut. And that goal really leads naturally to the need for community solar and why we need that. If we look at where the carbon pollution is coming from in Pennsylvania, we say it's about rule of thirds. It's about a third is coming from electric generation, about a third from transportation, and a third from everything else, but mostly industrial fossil fuel use is in that last third. And the solution to all of these is really electrification. I mean, if the electric generation sector, we have to clean our power grid. We've got to get off fossil fuels. Transportation, we have to electrify transportation, and we need the more clean electricity on the grid to supplant that. Same thing for industrial. So we need far more solar at wind, energy efficiency, and everything, but we need far more solar than we are currently on the path to get. And there's a couple ways to get it. We worked on a project. I know Liz and I think others on the call were involved in a Finding Pennsylvania Solar Future project where we brought about 300 stakeholders around the state and said, how do we solve this problem? How do we get just a 10% solar from about 0.5%? How do we get to that 10% goal? And one of the biggest factors was access to capital, as Liz and Chris both mentioned. How do you fund it? Another big issue, and I think was also mentioned by both, is solar access. How do we get solar to the people that need it? Now, access to capital in the broader world, years and years ago, more than 20 years ago now, electric utilities owned generation, and they made the decisions about what to build. The PUC approved it, and we as ratepayers paid for it. And that was the model. But that doesn't happen anymore in Pennsylvania. For generation, wholesale generation to get built, it needs to be privately funded. And to be privately funded, if it's going to be a solar project, they have to convince legislators that they have a market, or convince investors that they have a market. To convince investors that there's a market, they want some sort of a contract there. So in the big systems, you're seeing people like Penn State and City of Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania signing these massive power purchase agreements to get big systems built. That's what it takes to get them funded. But there's only so many of those that you can do. So what community solar does is it provides that piece that we can do. We can decide we want solar. We're not going to leave it up to the utility and leave it up to these large organizations. We can say we want solar. But as Liz mentioned, 50 to 75% of us don't have solar access. Renters, multifamily housing, shaded roofs, old roofs, systems that can't put solar on the roof. And even those of us, like I have solar on my roof here, but I don't have enough solar on my roof. I can't fit enough. So I still have this need for solar that I don't have any place to put. So the solution to that is community solar. And I think Liz did a great job outlining what it is. And aside from this, and I think Chris also mentioned the impact on low income ratepayers. Right now, and I live in PPL territory, PPL increased their electric rate 63% year over year, their price to compare. They did that because 50% of our generation is fracked gas, and fracked gas went up 125% year over year. So prices of electricity are going up and will continue to go up. So especially for low-income ratepayers, we need to give them access to solar. We need to give them alternatives. And we need to do it in a way that encourages investment so dollars come in to pay for these things to get built. We need to encourage subscriptions in these programs. We need a fair subscription method so people have a reason to sign up for these and to switch to solar. And we need to make it generally available. Now, one method that the legislature is moving forward with fails. It's a concept they call local solar, and it's in House Bill 1161, Representative Mizgorski pushing this. And basically what this bill says is if a utility wants to sell solar to their ratepayer, they can enter into a contract for a solar facility. That facility can get built and they can sell it to the ratepayer. The one thing you might notice there is zero competition. There is really nothing encouraging that to happen at any low price. Maybe, what is it? If they're a cent below what they would normally be charging their customers, they can say, hey, it's saving you money. And that really isn't what we're looking for here. What we want to do is create a market that brings in solar development, these smaller community solar systems, and really encourages people to switch to those systems by saving the money. So a system gets built, as Liz described, people subscribe to the system. So what they get out of it, the mechanism that subscriber benefits is key. Liz talked, in this normal system, we have net metering. So here with solar on the roof, if I generate more than I use, I can sell that back to the utility. The law says I get to sell it to my utility at full retail value. Now, the law doesn't say what value is, and PUC doesn't say what value is, but I get to sell it back at full retail value. In practice, it's something less than the full retail rate that you get for electricity. And this creates an obstacle because utilities don't like that. Utilities, as a rule, want to pay me the same for my solar on this roof as they would be paying a coal-fired power plant in Indiana County to generate that. They want to pay something order of 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour for the solar when the actual retail rate is, now closer to 12 and 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So this is really the tension here. Utilities, they just don't want to pay more than they have to for the money. And utilities have a voice with the legislature. So one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we and our legislators understand that putting solar on your roof is more than, has more value than just wholesale power that might be coal-fired power plant, miles and miles away. And there's plenty of reasons why it does. I mean, we don't have all those line losses of electricity wheeling across the state. We don't have the air pollution. We have a truly, secure domestic source of power that nobody owns, and we can't have Putin and all the people, manipulating markets, changing power prices and things like that. That doesn't happen with solar. Nobody owns it, nobody controls it. So it is a very secure power source. But solar has more value than that. When you are using community solar or locally owned solar, it is very much the same as if you are, buying vegetables from a farm stand down the road. People understand shopping small, buying local. That happens with distributed generation. If somebody can save a few dollars by putting solar on the roof, sure, they say probably they should be putting all of that money into their savings account and things like that. But people spend that money in their local community. It doesn't go to the corporate offices of the giant power plant owners several states away. It goes to the community, and that money gets spent in the community. It creates jobs in the community. The biggest growth industries and the projected biggest growth industries for years to come are solar technicians and wind technicians and solar installers. There is those are jobs that we can have here in the community. And the trick now, the difficulty is convincing our legislators that that is valuable. Now, there is currently a true community solar bill in the legislature. There's HB 1555 is the House version of that. And it shows signs of compromises and challenges that have happened. It would be much simpler to have just a simple net metering. Community solar can net meter like everybody else can net meter bill. The proponents of this bill have been going back and forth with the utilities on that. And they're creating a different scheme where the developers get what's known as a grid service payment for a period of time to install the facility. And then after that grid service payment phase, it guarantees subscribers what's known as the value stack, which is probably something less than full retail value net metering. Not as simple, not as clean, but the ultimate test of whether it's going to be successful or not is it providing enough incentive to consumers that they are going to sign up, that they are going to go forward with these programs? And that's really what we're looking at. Now, this bill isn't going to go forward in the legislature, well, this week and through the end of the budget cycle here. It's not expected to move. But it is expected to be discussed further over the summer, and it is expected that there is some strong support for this bill in the fall. If it can get through the committee process in Harrisburg, if it gets to a vote on the floor, we think it will pass. But it's going to be critical, really, to let legislators know that there is support for getting something to happen. And that support, well, it isn't necessary, it isn't unconditional support. It has to be something that's going to benefit the subscribers, that's going to encourage systems to get built, and it's going to lower emissions. I think I'll stop there and go to questions because I don't want to get too into the weeds of political maneuvering if we don't have to. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Rob. Now we have much more clarity on the policy side of community solar in Pennsylvania. So I'd like to thank each of our guest speakers again, Liz Robinson, Chris Spar, and Rob Altenberg. Thank you. We value your experience and we welcome your advice on the best ways to advocate in support of community solar. And we look forward to your participation in the Q&A session, which will start now. And Claudia or Margarita, would you like to read out some of the questions from the chat?
Hello. Let's see. Timothy Beckham was asking, it's my understanding that community solar is not legally available in Pennsylvania. Why is community solar not legal?
The way we define net metering in Pennsylvania, we don't have virtual net metering. To get credit for solar, that's called virtual meter aggregation. There's a number of differences, but one of the key ones is the solar panels on both sides have to be owned and operated, or the meters on both sides have to be owned or operated by the same people. They have to be 2 miles apart. And at least in the last time PUC talked about it, it can't be a virtual meter. It has to be a physical meter on both sides of the transaction. So all of that makes it very challenging to do anything that looks like community solar.
Goodness.
Yeah, but you don't have to have all those restrictions. And my question is more, what is causing the inhibition or the restrictions that would, whatever they turn out to be, you know, what you've just described, Rob, is one mode of that, but there are plenty of states that don't have those tight restrictions. And I don't understand why Pennsylvania can't come along in that direction as
Yeah,
well.
let me offer some thoughts, and then Rob can weigh in also. In Pennsylvania, our legislature is Republican, as you know, majority in both chambers. And I'll just be very honest, ever since fracked gas exploded in Pennsylvania as an industry, many of our legislators have been supported financially very heavily by the gas industry. They, some of them do the industry's bidding. The gas industry does not want to see solar flourish in Pennsylvania. They regard it as a, hard to compete. It's hard to compete with solar, and they don't want to. So they fight everything that they can. And we have been working very, very hard on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, for the last 2.5, 3 years. RGGI is now moving into final position to Pennsylvania should be able, we'll know more. Actually, Rob may know more about this, but we should be able to move RGGI into position as we speak. But the legislature, again, was obsessed with fighting RGGI. The Republican leadership was obsessed with fighting RGGI. And they said at some point about a year ago, we can't do anything in energy because we're just going to fight RGGI. That's all we want to do. We just want to fight RGGI. We don't want to do anything else. And so they have been obstructing and, dragging their feet, legislators, but it is the Republican leadership, and it is extraordinarily difficult. One of the ways that manifests itself is the leadership controls the committees, and bills never get out of committee. So there's a level of stagnation and inaptitude, frankly, in Harrisburg that is extraordinary. So I don't want to speak for Rob.
I'm not going to disagree with Liz on that, but I will add to that in addition to obstruction from the gas industry and the petrochemical folks, we also have the electric generation. The electric utilities are generally opposed to net metering, and we have organizations like the Edison Electric Institute, which is a trade association for electric utilities, paid for in large part by your rate paying, that lobbies heavily against net metering and climate action in general. We also have other groups like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that is, pushes bills out around states, shops bills around that are against clean energy, largely funded by Koch brothers, Petrochem type organizations. So there is a coordinated opposition to these things.
So to that end, Bill asked, and I was wondering the same thing, kind of what are the next steps? Like, is there a call to action? Is there some sort of movement? What's underway right now to move this forward, I guess, and who are the key players that we need to reach with this?
So the legislature is hopefully going to get this budget done, and then they're going to go home for the summer and be hopefully not doing any damage for a few months. And we will be back in town in September. This is the end of our legislative session. So basically our next shot to move something is between September and really the election in November when they're back in town. So we do have a window of opportunity to do something. We do have some key Republican legislators that want to see something get done. So what we're going to see is predominantly it's going to happen in the fall. There will be calls to action from organizations, probably ours. I'm sure Liz and other folks will be involved in this, where when they'll say, here is an opportunity to get something moving, people have to call legislators. That is a key form of action. Another one is if people know business owners that are in districts of Republican legislators, business owners that are friendly with Republican legislators, that we can get, really keep pressure on from all sides. I mean, we do have some pretty good strong, but this is, in the weeds politics to get something like this through. And it's, every way we can get in front of legislators and talk and say, this is something we need to do, we want it, it's got to move. That's what we're going to do.
On that, Robert, too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, oftentimes you can find bipartisan support for solar. I mean, there certainly are the legislators who are, at the helm of, or at the hands of the fossil fuel industry that don't want to give up sort of that support. But there's a lot of, Republican legislators who are representing rural districts. And from my understanding, I spoke, mainly about the urban situation around solar, but you have farmers who may be struggling, who have a lot of land and can really benefit from community solar legislation because they can, put solar on their land and be an owner of a solar array and benefit from subscribers who might be purchasing energy from them. And so it's just another way for a rural farmer to make an income. And so I think this can be a bipartisan issue, and there have been Republican legislators who are sponsoring and supporting solar energy bills, from my understanding.
Yeah, there's certainly increasing support from groups like the Farm Bureau, which is always challenging because of that very reason. I mean, voices like Senator Scavello has been generally a supporter of solar in the legislature, although not always a supporter of environmental causes. But he has the Pocono Raceway with their big solar facility there in his district, and is friends with the owner. So any connections like that can be made are very helpful for increasing the positive view. Unfortunately, right now we have, if there was a question about what committees these go through, these bills, depending on how they're written, will go through the Consumer Affairs Committee or the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Most likely the Consumer Affairs Committee. But we've had just committee chairs assigned that even though House leadership says we want to move this bill, the committee chair says, no, I'm not moving it. And very little that can be done. So hopefully that we'll see some of this shift here in the fall, but it's going to continue to be a fight.
One of the other big things that is changing is that RGGI hopefully will no longer be a present issue for the legislature. We'll be past that, and they won't be able to use RGGI as an excuse for doing nothing. And I think Chris is absolutely right. I felt for a long time that the key to much of solar advancing is to really have farmers and the agricultural sector, which is a key sector in Pennsylvania, become, they are very supportive of solar, but they need to become kind of, rabidly so. And in that space, we have a lot of work to do, but solar can preserve farmland because farmers can make more money leasing land to a solar developer than they can growing alfalfa or corn or anything else. And if they do it right, they can improve their soil at the same time. So developing farmers in the agricultural sector in a way that's really compatible with solar, I think, is key to the growth of the solar industry in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania really is a big farm state. Agriculture is and will remain absolutely key here. And we need the farmers to we need solar and farming to be moving together. Several people asked what the difference between buying solar from a third-party supplier like Green Mountain or Clean Choice, what the difference is between that and community solar. And I think Rob did a really great job of explaining that. And just to kind of revisit that here, when you buy a product from a third party, what you're getting is solar renewable energy credits. You're not getting, you don't know where those are coming from. They could be coming from anywhere. And usually you're paying a premium. You're paying a higher price than the default rate. With community solar, you would be getting local solar. As Rob said, it's going to be new solar, which is exactly what we need. We need additional new solar. And it's going to be local, and it can be, depending on how the law is structured, it can be less expensive than the default rate. And it can also, one of the keys here is that, and Chris, to your point about low income participation, again, depending upon how the law is written, community solar can be made available to low and low moderate income people at a savings. And we've figured out how to do this in Pennsylvania. It's not been written into all the laws that have been, all the bills that have been floating around, but it can be done in PA. And frankly, that would just absolutely be a game changer for many, many reasons. So this is something, and I think Rob said it really well, we need everyone to support and help this move in the fall. There is, in the background, a lot of broad support for community solar in both chambers. And I think if Reggie's no longer, kind of in front of everybody as the red cape on the raging bull, if they don't have that to distract them, we can focus on getting a really good bill passed. Are there any other questions?
I saw somebody asked about what the default rate was. Liz, do you want to take that, or do you want?
The default rate is the rate that if you're buying your supply from your utility, that's the default rate. And it varies utility to utility. And as Rob said, it's going up. So I think Rob, you correct me, but I think every utility in the state inched up a bit, and some more than others. When the utilities file for rate increases, they always file for both parts of the bill to go up. They file for the fixed charge to increase and the incremental cost. So in PECO's case, we beat back a huge increase that they requested on the fixed charge, and we managed to keep the increase down to 50% of what they were requesting on the volumetric rate. But every utility in Pennsylvania is asking for and getting rate increases.
And there's really,
sorry. I was just going to say the obvious. The thing about solar, one of the great things about solar is that it does not require these kinds of rate increases. So it's a much more stable cost, which is.
I'll say in general, and this may be electricity bill 101, but your electric bill, as Liz alluded to, there's fixed charges that everybody pays no matter what, and there's volumetric charges that you pay based on the amount of energy you use. We have another layer in Pennsylvania too. If you look on your Pennsylvania electric bill, somewhere on the bill, it'll say what your price to compare is. That price to compare is if you are not shopping for power, if you are letting your utility act as your default service provider and letting your utility sell you electricity, you will pay the price to compare. And that's listed on your bill, changes every quarter. They just raised it again in PPL territory here. I just noticed it had gone up 63% year over year. So it was 7 some odd cents last year. It's 12 something cents now. You can go to a site called papowerswitch.com. Look for alternative providers. As Liz mentioned, there you're buying clean energy credits, not additional power. But if you shop around, I'm buying clean energy credits through that site for what's left over when my, over the solar that I don't have enough of. And I'm paying 3 cents a kilowatt hour less than the price to compare. So you can shop around and you can get a good deal, but it's a challenge.
Thanks, Bill.
There is some comments and questions from whoever's at the Denley Music School. Sounds like they have a battery power system, which is a whole another system, and I think is oftentimes referenced in when you're talking about microgrids, where folks can actually store, additional energy that they produce that they don't use in a battery system. Now, my understanding is those systems are still very expensive. Those batteries have not quite come down in price yet to make it feasible for a lot of people to be able to do. But the question I think from them was, what is that storage in their battery worth to the grid? I'm not aware that you can sell energy from a battery system back to the grid. I don't know if anybody else is aware of that.
Pennsylvania is in a bit of a different position. A lot of things when you talk about selling, like using your electric vehicle battery or some other battery, you hear this in California. When your solar penetration rate gets up to a certain point. At the rate in Pennsylvania, with very low penetration, most of the solar is generated in the peak part of the day where most of the air conditioning is on, and it's all used up. All the solar is used up rapidly. In places like California, you have situations where they have the kind of a duck curve where electric prices can actually go negative in the day. And they're much more concerned about storage and shifting the electricity to when they need it. And that's much more valuable for the grid in California than it is in Pennsylvania. We are going to get to a point where people with batteries providing services to the grid is going to be recognized as necessary and valuable and very valuable. And we're going to see that. Where we are at the level of penetration we're at, it's just, we're not there to where people are really paying for that service.
I have a question. So do you hope / expect that one of the outcomes of RGGI will be to provide some of the needed funding that you're talking about? Will that become accessible through RGGI? Is that what we should be hoping for?
Yeah, under the way the current RGGI program is written, any of the proceeds from RGGI has to be spent on projects that reduce air pollution. And the DEP has gone a little bit further and say they particularly want to reduce carbon pollution. And they're talking about how that will be, how they can target environmental justice communities, low-income minority communities, particularly, and groups with that funding. And that could be helping to fund solar systems, where low-interest loan programs or direct grants or lots of other things like that. If the legislature, if we could get them behind it, the legislature could do even more. Whether it was job training programs or broader programs to offset the utility bills for low-income ratepayers and things like that. If with legislative support, we wouldn't really have any limits on what we could do with those proceeds. But yeah, right now, funding solar projects is going to be will be an excellent way of reducing pollution. So hopefully, yeah, we can get those funded. There's a question about rural electric co-ops. Rural electric co-ops are pretty much in their own world. They can really do whatever they want because they're not regulated by the Public Utility Commission in that way. I don't know any of them that are actively doing a community solar system. I just don't work with them. But yeah, and a lot of times, from what I've seen, a lot of the rural electric co-ops, they've been managing their system the way they've been managing their system for many years, and they really haven't. They don't have sustainability coordinators, and they don't have, where we're seeing like the rest of the world go. They're a little bit behind. So, yeah, I mean, it's an option. With a lot of things at the smaller municipal level, it's really a matter of finding a champion that wants to drive something there. So that could be done.
Julia had a very interesting question a while ago. Julia, do you want to ask that question?
Sure. I actually had a couple of questions. I'll start with the first one. I'm just trying to understand the whole aspect of community solar that is not allowed in Pennsylvania. So it sounds like what is not allowed is going through the electric utility to then credit the subscribers' bills. But like if a farmer built a, large solar array, split the cost with his neighbor, and then gave the neighbor half the savings, I assume that would be okay.
You could probably make a system work. There would be interconnection issues because, if it was completely off the grid, there wouldn't be an issue. Yeah, they could do it. If it's tied into the electric grid, you would have to work some sort of interconnection agreement out with the utility.
I'm just saying a purely monetary transaction.
Yeah, let me give you a real world one, which is actually a little simpler. And I'm forgetting if this was in Philly or another town, but a very, very large multifamily developer and shared the monetary, value of the solar with his tenants. So he had multiple commercial tenants, and the system produced more than he required. And so he wanted to sell it, essentially sell the power to his tenants. And I'm not quite sure what he had to do with the meters, but he used virtual meter aggregation in order to get that done. So again, virtual meter aggregation permits anyone who has multiple meters, that usually means multiple buildings, in the same name within a 2-mile radius, to put solar on the best one of those. And if it generates more power than that meter needs, the savings are then recognized at the other meters. So for example, many churches are doing this, churches that have multiple buildings, many farmers. Apparently this was written really for farmers. As the typical farm, the house has too many trees, you can't put solar on the house, but the barn has no trees and a much bigger roof. So you put the solar on the barn, and the barn has usually very little load. So you're just making the best possible use of your assets. It's a wonderful, if we could modify virtual meter aggregation and take away the 2-mile limit and the meters in the same name, we'd have community solar. Right, Rob?
I think to Julia's question, the two farmers, the energy produced by that array could only go to one of those farmers because they can't have both array because it has to be in the name of one of those.
It has to be in the same name. Yeah, the meters have to be in the same name.
Is that correct? Yeah. So Julia, I don't know if that answers your question, but the legislation, for whatever reason, does not allow for both the farmers to pull from that array.
And they could do
things. You can't spread the electricity, but there's no reason why they couldn't just, assuming you trust your neighbor, say, okay, this solar array is going to cost $50,000. You pay $25,000, and then half of all the savings, I just pay you every month half of what I'm saving.
What they're saving on their own electric bill, they would pay.
On their own electric bill.
So I guess that could work if both farmers were in agreement to that.
And you could create a system where you actually put 2 meters on the system, and you could do other things, assuming you could get the interconnection application approved. It met the standards, you could do that. The problem with a purely financial transaction is making something where you would have an enforceable contract that would ensure that, even if one of the people sold their property, that nobody's getting the short end of that stick. Yeah, challenging, still probably possible.
Okay. And my second question was about the PJM has the 2-year pause on approving large solar projects, and how would that affect community solar if community solar does get approved by the legislature?
This is happening at a distributed scale. So this is not it's not a wholesale grid tied system, so it does not go through PJM approval. So not applicable to these systems.
Excellent. That's good. That's what I wanted to hear.
That's the only good news we've given you all night.
So in summary then, what would you say the key barriers to developing policies on community solar in Pennsylvania are?
Politics, yeah. It's obstructionist politics.
I think given, I'll go back to the poll results that I cited early. I think given the overwhelming support for solar, and particularly forms like community solar across the entire state, this is rural, urban, suburban, Democrat, Republican, rich, poor, all age groups. It's just remarkable how broad and deep this support is. We can mobilize. We can mobilize people to really push much harder at their local legislators. And again, now that Reggie is through the gauntlet, hopefully we can focus on community solar and get it done. There is, as Rob said, there is a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for community solar, but there's been no willingness to really work at it in the legislature recently.
I also think that community solar is something unknown to so many voters, and
Right.
we're having a discussion tonight about this, and you all are very much engaged in climate action, and yet many of us are still trying to understand community solar. I mean, I've been trying to understand it for years. I wrote a PhD dissertation related to this stuff, and I'm still learning about it and still trying to understand it. It's complex and it's hard to understand. So I think if we can do a better job of bringing it to voters and explaining it and explaining the benefits of it, especially as we're seeing gas prices at what they are now. When gas prices are up, energy costs are up for folks.
Yeah.
We're so dependent on countries like Russia to control what the price of gas is. And if we had solar, that would not be an issue. And I think anybody in this country could get behind that idea. So I don't think we do a great job of explaining this to voters and bringing it to them, because I think it's so many the questions tonight were, I don't understand, why is this not legal? That's a great question, because it makes so much sense for it to be legal. I think we don't do a great job of making it a primary issue for people, even though everybody, no matter who they are, has to pay energy costs. And so I think we can do a better job of getting voters aware of this to put pressure on their legislators. So that's one thing I would say.
Personally, I agree 100%. And it just seems to me like one of the most fundamental things that we could do that would be beneficial to rebelling against climate change or undercutting it is to educate. And if each of us took on the responsibility of doing presentations or doing tabling, distributing literature, I'll be going with a friend to a Rotary Club on July 19th, as I recall. We'll be giving a presentation on climate change. They asked us to come and do an introductory thing. These are all fully mature adults. They should know a lot more, and they also, in most cases, probably had children and grandchildren of their own that will be dealing with this in their growing up years. Now, we should be all, I think, engaged in education in your own area. And I went to a middle school back before COVID hit us, and I had to stop. But I went to a middle school and did 4 or 5 different presentations to the middle school there in one class, and they were captivated by what I had to say. I mean, these were kids that were in 7th, 8th, some cases 9th grade, and they just knew that they were that at the end of the century, they were going to be living into the last half of the century. And then if we didn't do anything about climate change, they would be living in climate chaos. Now, they know that, but they're kids. They can lean on their parents to do something, but it takes adults, it takes us to actually educate and to actually bring this stuff through to people in forms that will inspire them to go into this political issue. It's a political issue because there's economic issues involved, but it's fundamentally scientific. We're really dealing with a science issue, and it's not something that we should be bringing politics into, but we do.
I think you're on the right track there, Timothy. I've talked to Rotary clubs myself about this. I'm a Rotarian, and I've talked to very conservative Rotary clubs. And the reaction I get when they hear about this is, "What do you mean that I can't buy this clean energy if I want to?" Why is the government stopping me from doing this and saving money on buying this energy? And they've organizations spoken with national Rotary organizations about this, and yeah, there's people that are very supportive of it when they hear it, but it is a matter of getting out there in front of people and talking about it.
Well, so I think one of the key things about it being scientific is that we can talk to both Democrats, Republicans, Independents, you name it, and if you deal with it at a scientific level, with a scientific focus, you will not have to engage in the political strife that comes along with all this other stuff that we've been talking about that just is emotional. We need to focus on the science, and that's where people will have to come together, and that's where the actual solution is.
So is the ideal scenario that a person, an entity could, if they could acquire the real estate, they'd be able to get funding to build a solar array and then create a community from businesses, people that want to buy their products. Is that basically what we're really hoping would be the...
That's going to be the most likely model. The most likely model that we're going to see is somebody that is a solar developer in this business that focuses on these type of systems is going to acquire land through some lease or purchase, is going to propose a project, get subscribers, get financing, build a system, and then provide energy to the subscribers. But once we have the legal framework, that isn't the only way that this can work. If we had, if a church has some property and wants to put up solar on their land and make the energy available to low-income parishioners, they can do that. If a school or if a community building wants to do it, they could use this model to get energy to people and reduce their electric bills. So yeah, the most common one is going to be the subscription model, but it isn't at all, once we get the tool, people can use it in a lot of ways.
So both of those models, however, is this where it potentially ties into Reggie because the money, the financing could come from?
Well, yeah. Reggie can make money available, but we could get community solar projects built easily without Reggie, without that funding. If somebody has a project idea and has signed up subscribers and says, we've got people that want to buy this energy, if there's contracts written, people said, we'll buy energy from this project, it is not hard at all to get banks and investment places and whatever to loan the money necessary to build the project. So access to capital isn't because there isn't money there. It's the money isn't going to get, they're not speculating on these projects. They're not going to speculate on solar being built unless they can see some evidence that they're going to get their money back through either a power purchase agreement or these subscriptions for community solar. Now, if Reggie puts money into it and lets them buy down loan rates and things like that, or lower the financing costs, that just makes it quicker, easier, better. But yeah, it's not required to make this work.
Great, thank you, everyone. I see we're close to wrap up. Anyone, I think we've answered everyone's questions. I know there was.
Alba, could you speak a little louder?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think it's time for us to wrap up. We're close to 8:30. Been a really wonderful evening. Thank you all for sharing your wealth of experience, knowledge, and insights with us to understand community solar better. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions to our discussions this evening. And I'd especially like to thank our distinguished guest speakers for joining us in this collaborative fashion to share their great work and emphasize the importance of Pennsylvania adopting community solar policies and legislation. So thank you, Liz, Chris, and Rob for your wisdom and guidance that you've shared with us all this evening. I know I've learned a lot more about community solar and hopefully what more we can do going forward. Sounds like more education and pushing these for better policies and getting those through. But it's clear it's going to take all of our combined efforts to make community solar a reality in Pennsylvania. So for our next steps, I believe we've covered all of the questions, but if we've missed any, please send those to me and we'll see if we can get those answered for you. And some of those were also answered in the chat, I believe. We'll follow up after the meeting by sending you the recording and additional resources that we've shared tonight. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. And together, I hope we can keep Pennsylvania moving in this transition to clean energy and hopefully reap the resulting health benefits, health and economic benefits to be gained for all Pennsylvanians, all of us.
Thank you, Alba.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alba.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, Alba.
evening.
We need you.
Thanks, Abba.
Thank you.